My name is Charlene Margot, and I'm co-founder of nonprofit The Parent Venture. We are delighted to present tonight My Body to Love, Katie's Story, Fostering Healthy Relationships with filmmaker Preeti Mankar Deb, sexual health educator Ivy Chen, and Katie Reeder, a program director from Health Connected. Please join me in a really warm welcome, everyone, for Preeti and Ivy and Katie. Take it away, Preeti.
Thank you so much, Charlene. It is such an honor to be here, and especially to be here with you and Ivy, who was actually the sexual health educator for my son in 5th grade, which is how I met her, and Katie, who's here in the flesh. I mean, I met her first in the flesh, but I see her much more in my films now than I do in person, so it's great to have her here. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining. I want to just talk a little bit about this project, My Body to Love. I'm just going to share my screen. Yes, and I just want to also say, the My Body to Love project, in this project, we use the power of personal stories to encourage parents to have frequent, honest, open conversations about body, safety, and relationships with their growing children. Being a parent myself, I'm so grateful to the Parent Venture for all the work that they do, and for bringing to us parents, all of this really amazing education that we need. I mean, I know firsthand that this is the hardest job in the world, and often we are imperfect. So having these resources is just so helpful. I want to talk a little, before I get into the project, My Body to Love, I want to just share my children. These are Sean and Amartya. They are 9, 2 boys, 9 and 11 years old. And really this project started, I mean, these are the reason I get out of bed every morning is them, literally. But also, the reason I do this work is inspired by them and other young people in this world. Really, when I kind of, after the Dobbs decision, I wanted to do some work in body autonomy, and I started talking to young people to kind of understand what the challenges were that they were going through. And I had this realization that if we can have open conversations, comprehensive sex ed and open conversations with young people, giving them the resources and the tools to be confidently in control of their own bodies, we can really make huge strides towards elevating young people's relationships and their overall health. So that's kind of how this idea started, My Body to Love. The way the project works is we use personal stories to, in the form of film, like Katie's story that you will watch today. And all of these personal stories deal with young people's experiences with, their own coming of age stories, their own experiences with body, safety, relationships, contraception. And we screen these within communities. And the idea is, the theory of change is that if we do this enough, it will lead to healthier youth. You will be watching Katie's story, but I want to share the trailer for this series, and just give me 1 second because I want to make sure that I am sharing the audio as well. Okay, I am. So this is the trailer for My Body to Love.
I was a little bit of a late bloomer. I definitely remember my friends having body changes before me. And I remember really wanting, I wanted to grow breasts so badly.
My brother from a young age would call me a girl, and would call me a girl in a way that was not intended to be a compliment.
My first boyfriend, 9th grade, it started out very cute. I remember our first Valentine's, he made me a little flip book. He put in an actual key, and it's this is the key to my heart.
When I became pregnant, I was 16. I was, on track to go to college, to have a career, to be a responsible adult.
I'm forever grateful that from a young age, I was more feminine.
So I did feel like I had sex way before I was ready. I just wish I had more conversations. Like, even though someone says they love you and they care for you, that's not the precursor to having sex. The precursor to having sex is making sure that you yourself are okay with it and ready for it.
And I know that Arjun forgives me here, but I feel bad that I wasn't there for my child.
I think if people were to talk more deliberately, intentionally, and openly about bodies and about connection with other people's bodies and about how our bodies change, I think we would have less harm happening in the world. So people would have a better sense of their boundaries. They would have a better sense of how to respect other people's boundaries.
Something that's very important to me to like pass on to my kids is the inherent dignity that I think every human being is born with.
So, yeah, that's the trailer for the 4 pieces that make up the first episode of My Body to Love. And as I was saying, these stories use the power of personal stories to explore complexities of sexuality, health, safety, and relationships in adolescence. The way that the My Body to Love project events are structured is we screen the films in community, so an online community like we're doing today, but also in person with parents together. And then the idea is that, parents there's 2 levels of connection. The films are actually designed as a wave of connection and positivity. And we emphasize connections within the audience members, as well as then they're able to take those, take any learnings, insights home and focus on their connections with their children. We go a little bit deeper into some of these topics here, and in the same way that today we're talking about healthy relationships. The idea behind the events is for parents to have inspiration on how to for us as parents to do more work on how to consciously be an askable adult for their child, and specifically have these frequent, honest conversations about sex, sexuality, bodies. We are working with PBS, and we are looking at a PBS broadcast for the first episode later this year. And I'm also working on building a library of these short stories so we can really, have representations of all aspects of sex, intimate personal stories on sex and sexuality. Currently working on more LGBTQ stories, as well as a South Asian episode. So yes, stay in touch. I mean, if you have any questions about the events or you want to host an event, please get in touch with me or to learn more about the projects. And now I'm going to share with you Katie's story. So every time I watch this film, I always feel a sense of gratefulness to you, Katie, for having the courage to share this deeply personal story, and as a result of which, helping so many people reflect on the need for education about unhealthy relationships and what a healthy relationship actually looks like. So thank you for that. And we'd love to just get have you speak to it now.
Yeah, thank you, Preeti. And I apologize to everyone. I am losing my voice, so I hope you can understand me tonight. But it was such an honor to work on this project. It has been such an interesting experience reflecting on the way that this being a project that is now immortalized and out in the world has metamorphized my healing a little bit, and my looking back on my own experiences and thinking about the motivations that brought me to the work that I do. And I am a sexuality educator. I teach about healthy relationships. I work with other adults who teach about healthy relationships, and And it's so much of a driving force of what brings me to the work that I do, thinking about the intersection of education and life experience, and that you can't live your best life without either of those two things, that you really need both, and that education cannot be a full substitute for life experience, but that it certainly can do a great deal in setting someone up for making decisions that are going to be able to bring them toward decisions that they can look back on with pride, with an alignment of their own values. And while I certainly don't regret anything that I experienced, because it taught me so much, and it really highlighted for me why I was so passionate about bringing not just sexual health education, but education around awareness of body signals and awareness around the nervous system, and what does it feel like to feel invaded by another person. Gaslighting is such a buzzword these days, and narcissism is such a buzzword these days, and it feels so important to me, and I know to you as well, Preeti, to think about how hearing personal stories and hearing from people who have experienced these things can not only really humanize these experiences, but also show us that it doesn't matter what your background is. It doesn't matter what education you've had. It doesn't matter race or gender or any of these things. We are all vulnerable to harm. And what does it look like to learn what we need to learn to be best armed to go out in the world, while also, knowing that many, many people will still experience this, and what does healing look like on the other side as well. So I'm really grateful to you, Preeti, for the work that we got to do together and for being a part of this project. I'm so honored to be a part of this project, and I can't wait to hear more about how it lands with people. I wish there was even more I could share. Obviously someone's life cannot be boiled down to 7 minutes, but I'm happy to hear questions from folks on the call right now, and answer as many of them as I can, and I hope it makes a difference. I think, Ivy, I'm passing it over to you.
All right, thank you so much for sharing your story. That was very moving. What I'm going to do is share my screen. And what I would like to do is to especially give parents some tools to be able to talk with their own kids about healthy romantic relationships. I think for a lot of people, this can be a difficult subject, and it could be really touchy or scary to actually talk about this. But I think that it's really important to realize that parents are the primary sexuality educators of their own kids. You always have been, whether you've actually been talking with them directly about it or role modeling certain behaviors, even in your own relationship. And so I think that the best way to protect our kids is to give them the knowledge and the skills to enable them to make smart decisions about their bodies and relationships. This is in opposition to, say, censoring things and making it so that they don't actually get to hear about this, because maybe it is really tough. And so I think that it's good for them to hear it from you. And it's also good to realize that this is going to be an ongoing discussion. It's not just going to be the talk, the one big talk that you're going to have where you talk for 2 hours and you think you've covered everything. And so this is going to be an ongoing conversation where it's likely that they're going to ask questions, you answer them, and then they're going to go away, think about it a little bit, and then come back with more questions. And so what I want to do is to give you some tools, activities that I actually use in the classroom, in particular with 8th graders and with high school students. And the other thing too at SF State is that I do teach a semester-long psychology course about healthy romantic relationships. By the time that I meet those young adult students, a lot of them have actually had romantic relationships before. A lot of times they had to figure it out through trial and error. And sometimes these errors can be very traumatizing. They might actually come into the class already with a history of some abusive types of behaviors that has happened in their relationship. I think that one of the best things that we can do is to start these talks early. So we're talking about younger kids. And so even though I do these activities in the classroom with, say, 13 or 14-year-olds, that it is possible to actually have these conversations even when you're talking with your puberty age kids, where maybe they're 10 or 11, and perhaps they're actually interested in a TV show where there are some relationships and some drama going on, and you can start asking them some questions. In fact, that's a good tool because it depersonalizes it. It's not like you're asking them, who do you like, and that kind of thing. And if they're open to that, that would be great. But I think that actually using some of these characters that they like and see can also be a way to get these conversations started. So here are some of the questions that I use whenever I'm talking in a classroom with eighth graders. Now, just realize that in middle school, commonly they're not dating yet. Most people get into their first serious romantic relationships, perhaps in high school or even college, in which case you do have a lot of time. And what we're trying to do is to make it so that we can guide their decision making so that they are able to make healthy decisions in relationships in the future. Okay, so one of the questions that you can ask is, what are qualities that you want in a romantic partner? And so it's a pretty open-ended question. And so you might actually even say, well, let's take turns. Maybe you give me one and I give you one. And it's really funny because sometimes in a classroom, I might ask, okay, let's come up with a list of qualities. And I have had students say, what? I can only think of two: looks and personality. They say it like personality is just one thing, and it's not. And actually, whenever we're done talking a few minutes later, we have a pretty good list. And so these are some of the most common answers that I get. And I'm telling you, these are from 13 and 14-year-olds. And so these seem like pretty mature answers, especially when we're able to have a group discussion about this. And so even though they might mention something about physical attractiveness, and in a lot of cases, this is one of the things that might distinguish a friendship from a romantic partner, you can see that the rest of the list about being kind and respectful, funny, having things in common, they accept you for who you are, they're a responsible person, they're trustworthy, honest, loyal, good at communication, and that they try to maintain good health, both physical and mental health in themselves, that all of these are actually really good human qualities. And in fact, especially if you have a younger child, what you can do is actually talk about this in the context of what makes a good friend. Because I think that sometimes when we talk about relationships, especially when you say it like relationship, that people often think of just romantic relationships, when in fact there are so many different relationships in our lives, including friendships. And starting at even elementary school age of talking about what makes a good friend, how can you be a good friend? And you can see that many of these traits already play a role. So I think that if they have strong friendships and that they're able to discern good, kind human qualities, that this will also translate later into a healthy romantic relationship as well. Now, we usually play a game where we have them vote about agree, disagree statements. And so here are some samples. And you can definitely borrow these to have conversations with your own kids and teens about their thoughts regarding these issues. So, agree or disagree. If my partner wanted to read my emails and text messages, I would let them. And so there's not really a right or wrong answer here. And so I think that it's a lot about personal opinion. And a lot of times kids are like, well, it depends. And I totally understand that. It depends on how serious you are, how long you've been together, and maybe what it is that they're looking at and reading. In a lot of cases, though, it might mean handing over the device and maybe sharing passwords. And I think what's really important is to impart the fact that people are entitled to privacy, even if they're in a romantic relationship, even if they're married. And so what that means is that you can let them know that they can make decisions about what to share and what not to share, especially about messages that are coming from other people like friends or family, where they did not actually give consent for them to share these personal thoughts with a romantic partner. So that's something to think about, especially as many of the kids are starting to get cell phones at younger and younger ages, to make sure that they are able to keep them private and to let them know that you as a parent may be able to look through their messages because of your role as their parent, but a romantic partner who should actually be equals with them and don't have authority or power over them, or at least they shouldn't, should not be able to just look through it without actually checking. Here is another one. Agree or disagree, jealousy is a normal part of a healthy relationship. This is really tough, especially since I think in our culture, a lot of people interpret feeling jealous as caring. Well, I'm only jealous because I care. I'm only jealous because I love you. And I think what they don't realize is that jealousy is often linked to a different set of emotions, usually fear and insecurity, usually fear of losing the partner, getting cheated on, getting dumped. And so oftentimes they try to hold on tighter or they exhibit controlling behaviors. And so I think kind of reframing what jealousy actually is and how that it's not flattering, it's not healthy, even if a lot of people might actually feel or exhibit it. I've actually had students say, well, maybe there could be healthy jealousy. Oh, that's an interesting thought. And so healthy jealousy might be where you feel that emotion and you check in with yourself about what that might mean. And instead of just reacting right away or trying to control your partner, trying to tap into what that means about how you feel or about your relationship, and then perhaps actually having a conversation with your partner where you could be growing from this experience. Here's another one, agree or disagree. Once I get a serious romantic partner, I won't need my friends anymore. And the large majority of students will say disagree. And I'm really happy to see that, despite the fact that these don't have correct answers. And so it's really important to maintain balance in our life. It's really easy. I think this is kind of a common rookie mistake when you first fall in love and it's a really serious and it's a very powerful emotion to be in love and you just want to be with this person more and more, and that you're neglecting your friends and you're not even realizing it. You're not doing it on purpose, but it's happening. And then all of a sudden you look around and they're not around anymore. And so it's really important to have friends and family in your life while you're in a romantic relationship. Not only does it provide balance, it also helps to provide emotional support that's not just coming from one person. And also, I think that it's important really for even the partner. This is too much pressure for them to have to be your everything. And so maintaining a balance is really key in a lot of different parts of our life, but also maintaining all the different relationships that we have is an important skill. Okay. And a lot of times, like I said, neglecting our friends isn't intentional, but it does happen. So that awareness can help. And even ending a relationship. See, a lot of people are interested in learning how to start a relationship, how people fall in love and how they meet. But ending a relationship with dignity and respect, that's an art form too. And a lot of people don't know how to do it. And as a result, they get ghosted. They break up with people over text message. They end up having a really negative experience, even with a person whom they thought was actually a really nice partner, a good person. And yet, as they were ending the relationship, it really goes badly. And so, to talk about how you can end a relationship, and ideally, if it's not an abusive situation, to be able to do it face to face, to actually give this person closure, and to have a live conversation is actually a good way to be able to end a relationship with kindness and dignity. All right. So this chart is actually one of my favorites. Want to give credit to loveisrespect.org. It's one of the resources I'll be sharing with you this evening. And so you can see that there are 3 columns. And so on the left-hand side are healthy qualities in a relationship. And again, not limited to romantic relationships, but you can see that it includes a lot of the things that we had said was in the list of what would make a good partner. Communication, respect, trust, honesty, being able to enjoy time with each other and away with each other and away from each other. And unhealthy relationships would often be the opposite of those things, lying or exhibiting more control over a partner or not communicating. And then in downright abusive situations, there can be things such as saying harmful things emotionally, psychologically, forcing a partner to do something they don't want to do. And as Katie had said, gaslighting, in other words, claiming they haven't done or said something you know they have, and distorting the truth and really making it so that reality is up for question. Okay. And so in that case, I often actually say, look, this is going to be part of your packet that you're going to get from me at the end of our workshop. And you should print it out and post it on your wall. I think that this is actually a really good thing to check in on. Really, it's like a checklist just to make sure that your relationship is actually staying in the green zone and that there may actually be some issues that the two of you might need to work on. So this is actually a good touchstone. Okay, and so this is actually called the Dating Bill of Rights. That's adapted by Advocates for Youth, and you can see that it's got a lot of really good points, including the right to treat trust yourself above all others, the right to say no, including to sex, and the right to be loved and cared for. I think one reason why I like including this is because I think a lot of people might define love by how much they're willing to sacrifice. Well, I must love you because of all the crap I'm putting up. And that's a real deficit way of looking at relationships. I think that in a healthy relationships, both people contribute to the relationship and both people gain something from it. And so again, this is actually a good checklist as well, just to make sure that there's a good amount of self-care that's happening. This is also a really good question to share with your kids as well. What are some ways to show love or affection? And you can either add the part about without having any type of sex, or just perhaps actually, as people like to talk about the various love languages, whether it be verbal, whether it be acts of service. Maybe you're doing them a favor or buying them a gift or whatever it is, or affectionate touch as well, like hugging and snuggling and things like that. So that it's really, I think, important for them to differentiate that there is a difference between affectionate touch and sexual touch, and that having sex shouldn't be a way to prove that you love somebody, especially since there are so many different ways to show love or affection. Okay, now to wrap up, what I want to do is share a few resources with you, especially if you have younger kids from 5th to 8th grade. This is a great website. This is called amaze.org. And so you can see that they actually include a lot of different topics. These are all short, about 2.5 minute long cartoons that include a lot of different topics. And so you can see that there's a tab for healthy relationships, and that will be shared in the chat with you. Feel free to click on it and you can see all the different short videos that they have about healthy relationships. As parents, what you can do is click on the link either for parents or for educators, and there are often follow-up discussion questions that accompany those video clips. And so you could watch this together at home and have those conversations. And again, in most cases, you're having these talks years before they're going to be dating and having any kind of romantic relationships. And so they could actually talk about this in a more theoretical kind of a way. And especially if you're starting young, and I'm talking about even like 4th or 5th grade, 6th, 7th grade, they're still open to talking with their trusted adults in their life. So if you're only going to start these conversations when they're 16, it's going to be a lot harder. You remember how self-conscious you were when you were a teen, and the mortification of talking to your own family about this. And so if you were to start young, not only are they going to be more used to this, that they should be able to talk about this with you more comfortably. They've had experiences of talking with you ever since they were young. And when they're older teens, they're more likely to continue that line of conversation with you, especially when the stakes are higher. Now, the next two websites are definitely going to be for older teens, including for high school students or college students. And so this is a good one. It's called loveisrespect.org. And then there's another one called Join One Love. There are a bunch of different links up here. And if you click on the one for relationships, it will take you to this site. There are a lot of additional videos and guidelines about healthy versus unhealthy relationships as well. So I feel like that we can make the internet work for us. It's not just filled with porn and all kinds of advertising, but I do think that what we have to do as parents and educators is to realize that we got to get ahead of the game. The teens these days are growing up with the internet, and they're getting a lot of sexual information that they are, I would say, exposed to, but not necessarily have the ability to decipher or realize what's real and what's not. And so that's why we got to get in there and make it so that they know who to ask questions to and get accurate information from. So this is just one more thing. This is, I think, actually the other antidote. In addition to parent communication, there can also be great sex education in school that includes information about things like boundaries, consent, conflict resolution, communication, and healthy relationships. And so hopefully what we're able to do is to give our kids tools to be able to make healthy decisions about their future relationships. And with that, I am going to wrap up and throw it back to Charlene. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ivy. That was fantastic. We appreciate all the advice and suggestions and excellent resources. When Preeti approached us about her wonderful films, we said, let's do it. Let's do it and let's wrap it in an educational component, because that's part of what the Parent Education Series and the Parent Venture does. And today was a perfect example of that. All right. We would love to hear from you now. If you have questions, drop them in that Q&A box. Thank you for those of you who have put questions in there. Here's one to start with, because this is the one that just always throws me. Both of you have mentioned that the statistics are really quite high for teenage dating violence and partner abuse. So given that, why is it so difficult for parents to talk to teens about intimate partner violence? Anybody?
Well, I can, well, being a parent, I think that we have this fear that if we say it, it comes true. You really don't want to even accept the fact that this is a possibility for your child. And I think it comes from that. So I think that education for parents to understand, the statistics, like the epidemic, as Ivy just said, that is going through, and how common this is important, so that we understand the need to have these conversations.
Absolutely. Ivy, I think you're on mute. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah. So as I was saying, this can be a touchy or even scary topic. And I think that a good approach is to talk about what you want from a relationship rather than what you don't want. So sometimes even when I ask students, well, what are qualities you want in a partner? They'll start listing what they don't want. Not this, not that. And so rather than focusing on the negative aspects, I think focusing on what's positive and what builds a healthy relationship would be I think, better approach at talking about this and then guiding that decision making. So I don't think it actually has to be a negative conversation at all. You're really talking about things even ranging from healthy friendships to what a healthy romantic relationship look like, taking characters from their favorite shows or even books and kind of analyzing it a little bit and seeing whether those are healthy relationships or not, and what traits make them healthy or unhealthy. And so it's really just skills that we're giving them to be able to understand relationships and hopefully be able to recognize when something is healthy or unhealthy if they were to encounter it in real life.
Absolutely. It's funny because we've been doing education around sexuality for a long time in this program, often Katie with Health Connected. And even though parents, we want our kids to have successful romantic relationships, somehow sex and dating gets wrapped into sort of the just say no conversation, right? You can do it, but just not yet. You can do it, but just not while I'm involved. So I'm hoping, Preeti, that these kinds of films like you're producing will get that conversation started. As Ivy said, it can begin when kids are really little, right? With consent about, I have a 2-year-old granddaughter and they ask if they can take her picture. They ask if they can put her socks on. And I think it starts there. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yesterday we had and I had an event, and I said something that actually Natasha Singh had said at our previous, it's actually the education literacy person we had last time, Natasha. She said that if we only talk to our kids in terms of fear and shame, we're setting them up to have really low expectations for relationships. And, at the circle, we talked about how it would be transforming to talk to children in terms of what we hope their relationships will look like. We hope that they will have relationships based on mutual respect and consent and pleasure, when they do have intimate physical relationships. And I think that's really important.
Oh, really well said, Preeti. We had Dr. Samir Hinduja on last week talking about cyberbullying, sort of connected to sexuality for kids. And he actually has parents go through a values exercise with their student to protect them so that when something happens, they can say, but I'm a good person. I'm a good friend. I share. So they have that to fall back on. I thought that was a really good idea. And Katie, we first of all want to thank you for your vulnerability and courage in sharing your story. Preeti, you did it so beautifully and respectfully, but we are getting the question, and it's a good one. Were there any warning signs early on in your relationship that you wish you'd known sooner?
It's a fantastic question, and boy, were there. Yeah. I think looking back, I could give a whole list, but a few that immediately come to mind that in general, I remember the blur of the early part of that relationship being an intensity level at a 15 out of 10, that it wasn't necessarily that it was bad intensity or fights or something that I construed as negative, but that the overall intensity for every one of our interactions was so high that it was all of these superlatives being said, you know, and all of this like intense, effusive affection. And there wasn't a lot of just hanging out or just going to do something casually or, you know, speaking about things that we were both mutually interested in. It was like a lot of early talk about, you know, I see this amazing quality in you that's so special and so amazing, and it's the best thing I've ever seen. And it, again, is just like so much intensity. And a phrase that we'll often talk about is love bombing. So for those who don't know, you know, when a partner is, you know, dropping these kind of bombs of love and affection that seem like a good thing that someone might interpret as, oh, they really clearly, they see me, they care about me, when actually it can be very overwhelming. And so I think I was overwhelmed most of the time in those early months. I think I was also rushed into an early commitment. I had to make a decision. This wasn't in the documentary, but my ex was Canadian, and so I actually had to make the decision to move to another country to be with him. And so that really rushed the commitment much faster than I think it would have been if we had both been from the same area. There was a real focus on optics. He really cared about optics. Like, what will other people think of us? What will they think of me? If you were to tell, you know, if we have a fight and then you tell your friends about it, they're going to think that I'm horrible, so don't tell them. And I think anytime someone is feeling like they have to hide or edit what they're sharing with their friends and family about what a partner is saying or doing to protect that partner from coming off as the bad guy or the bad whoever, that's a warning sign for sure. And I just remember in our first fight, which was probably only a couple months in, he was speaking to me in a way that it didn't matter what the words were, but I remember my body felt afraid. And I told that to my brother, and my brother said, you know, wow, you know, fight aside, I'm really sorry that happened, but what I'm hearing you say is that you are afraid of the person that you're dating. And I want you to think about that. What does that mean? And is that a relationship that you want to be in? And I think I was at that point just head buried all the way in the sand and did not want to hear that. But it was a moment in a conversation I'll never forget, that, yeah, realizing that I felt fear toward a partner that early on was a big red flag.
Boy, those are some really great insights, Katie. Wow. A lot to think about. I'm sure you share that with the students when you're teaching. Yeah. So Preeti, this is such an important topic. Why did you feel compelled to make a film about intimate partner violence and healthy relationships? Why now?
Well, I wanted to make a film about healthy relationships because like the statistics that exist and this feeling that we have. I mean, I myself have been in an unhealthy relationship, and when I think back on that, I really didn't understand. I had had no previous training to understand what the difference between a good relationship and an unhealthy relationship. And a lot of times when you're young, you have this idea. I mean, a lot of the media that we consume, the books that we read too, they're full of unhealthy relationships where there's, you know, this partner who's like obsessed with you, and there's high passion and high drama, which is so exciting and romantic. And then when you fall into those relationships, you have a sense that, oh, maybe this is normal, maybe the high drama and the high passion is what a relationship is supposed to be. And just drawing from that and talking to young people and talking to Katie and realizing that I love that the checklist you showed us, Ivy. Like if all people could have that in front of you every day to check in, like, am I veering into the unhealthy territory? Because it's also self-regulation that's important. And if we don't have education, we can't expect to have the best relationships because it's not internal. I mean, so much of this stuff that we think should just be instinct, it's not. We need education.
Boy, isn't that the truth? And all you have to do is look at any reality TV right now. Yeah. And it's the relationship. It's so terrible, isn't it? Jealousy is the norm and abuse is kind of the norm. It's scary, right? What kids are getting to see today. So, Ivy, given that this topic can be difficult and that many in our audience today are parents, what would you say to a reluctant or uncomfortable parent about how to open this kind of conversation with a child or a teen?
Yeah, I really like the idea of using shows or characters that they're already watching together because it doesn't really feel quite as personal. And just to get their opinion on it. And actually, as Preeti was talking about this, I was thinking about the fact that so many middle schoolers that I'm teaching are still reading Romeo and Juliet. And often we use that phrase to mean, oh, star-crossed lovers, there's some kind of paragon of romance, when of course, spoiler alert, they're both dead at the end, a bunch of people are dead, and that their relationship had a lot of impulsiveness, deceit, lust, and that it moved really, really quick. There was a high intensity about it, and it ended as a tragedy, you know? And so, but still, I think that people might interpret that story as this is what romance is. It's about all this drama. And it also reminds me, gosh, a number of years ago when the Twilight series were really popular, and whether you're on team Edward or Jacob, both were not great. Okay, right? A lot of stalkering type of behaviors, and to actually just bring up those characters and just analyze them. I think that that would be a good way to start the conversation. If you're not shy, you could actually share even your own history of dating or relationship with your kids. And I think that sometimes, you know, when your kids are in high school, it's hard for them to picture you as a youth or as a teen. And for you to share stories like, gosh, I remember going to the prom and this is how I felt. And I was really excited and I was head over heels in love. And to maybe share what you learned. And so I know that sometimes people are like, ooh, if I open that can of worms, they're going to start asking me real personal questions like, how old were you when you had sex? And I think that it's actually more important to get at what you learned from that experience. And you could say, well, I wish I waited, or actually it was, I think, the right time for me because of this and this and this, and to share from your personal experience. And it really does, if you will, kind of humanize who you are. You don't have all the answers. You had to figure it out too. And that could be a good way of starting those conversations with them. And oftentimes, if you make yourself more vulnerable, your kids might be willing to share a little bit more about what's going on in their lives as well.
That really makes sense, Ivy. Thank you. So we don't have too much time together, but there's a few more questions I really want to get to. And this one is for any of you. How does culture factor into discussions about intimate partner violence and relationships? Are there some cultures where this topic is really kind of taboo?
I think culture influences all of these conversations, you know, culture, values. And definitely there are some cultures that are not comfortable talking. I mean, I come from India, and despite being, you know, land of Kama Sutra and, you know, these beautiful temples where we have, you know, naked sculptures, we don't talk about sex very freely in India and amongst the South Asian community. And there's kind of this prevailing idea of, oh, if you don't talk about it, it's not going to happen. You know, you kind of live in denial. And I think that, and part of my Body to Love project is to normalize that, you know, despite like that, this is basic humanity. This is what happens with all of us. You know, it's very normal development, part of being human. And I think that if we can have representation, you know, of the different cultures going through all of these things that are so normal that sometimes the parents want to put blinders in front of their eyes and not think about, is important. So yes, I think culture influences all of it. And that's part of we have to bring it out into the open, put sunshine on it so that we start talking about it more freely.
Yeah, and I think your films do that in such a beautiful way. The diversity of your subjects really makes these conversations, I think, more palatable for parents. Yeah. Ivy, you would agree?
Yes, definitely. So I come from the Chinese culture and I immigrated here from Hong Kong. And it's a very similar story, a lot of silence in the home about sexuality. And it engenders a lot of shame, embarrassment, fear. And those kinds of emotions can make it so that people can have really negative sexual health outcomes, including not going to see their doctor about their sexual health or not insisting on condom use or actually being in a situation where they don't speak up when they feel like that there is a relationship power imbalance. And so, and especially, when you take into account that certain cultures or religion may also have gender role expectations, in particular for the female partner to be perhaps more submissive or to be more agreeable and not necessarily insist on having any conversations about things like sexuality, and to kind of make it so that, especially in heterosexual relationships, that they end up giving more power to the male partner. And so, yeah, definitely culture. All these are all parts of the intersectionality that makes up who we are, right? All different parts of our identity that can have either a positive or a negative impact on our sexual health and relationships, for sure.
Absolutely. And as I tell my daughter, we're trying to pay it forward. We're trying to get better as we move on. My mother was Canadian. She had 5 babies and never used the word pregnant because that was not polite. But my daughter became a birth doula and now she works in public health. So as I say, we're doing better as we keep going, right? The generations, hopefully each of us will get a little bit better as we move on. So we have just a few minutes left, and I really would love to hear just sort of some final parting words from each of you about what you hope parents and caregivers are going to take away from tonight and from Preeti's wonderful film, Katie's story. Katie, I'm going to start with you.
Oh my goodness. If only one thing? So many things I hope people take away from this. I know it's a short film, but I think, Preeti, your choice to make these films short and actually really distilled is so powerful. I hope that we can take away that, oftentimes intimate partner violence can sort of hide in plain sight in our families, friendships, communities, and that if someone is experiencing it, they may not, it's going to look so many different ways. It's really going to be this personal experience that someone is going through. And this process of finding autonomy and finding a voice again is so incredibly, incredibly personal. And that community, family, friends, people that know us and love us are the bedrock of that entire process. And so for me, on the other side of it, I'll speak to that if you know someone who has experienced it, or if you are supporting a child or a family member, as their trusted adult, that it is incredibly healing and incredibly important to be heard, and to have, as was spoken earlier, this is what I want for you, be the leading tone rather than, you made a bad choice, or, I wish you hadn't done that, or I wish you hadn't trusted this person. I mean, it's incredibly healing to hear, I trust you, I believe in you, and I know you can make amazing choices, and this might have been a painful path for you, and I'm here for you to pick up the pieces.
Thank you, Katie. Those are incredibly wise finishing words. We really love that. Very self-aware. Appreciate everything, Katie. Ivy, back to you for a few parting comments.
I'll keep it short and sweet. I just really hope that parents feel a little bit more empowered to be able to have these conversations comfortably, to really feel like they have the motivation to be able to have these talks with their own kids, and to realize that it's important for them to have the talks themselves, not to leave it to the schools, or not to leave it to, God forbid, pop culture and internet for to be the sex educators of their kids, but to take on that role, and to be open to these conversations. They're going to be repeated conversations, and that the more you practice, the better you get at it, and the more comfortable it'll be to talk with your kids about this. So I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you, Ivy. And Preeti, last words from you, our filmmaker and producer. Thank you for the opportunity again tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to speak as a parent, and I just think that, we pour so much time and energy and effort into helping our children figure out who they want to be when they grow up, what they're going to do professionally, where they're going to go to school, what they can excel at. And we know this, that, you know, at the end of life, what really stays with people is the quality of their relationships. So if we can pour more effort into, you know, how are you going to fill your life with beautiful, rich relationships, both friendships and, you know, intimate relationships, we will all be richer. So, you know, that's what I hope that we can all do more of.
That's really beautifully said, Preeti. We're going to end it there on those very, very lovely words. Thank you, everybody, for being with us tonight. A huge thank you to Preeti Mankar Deb and Ivy Chen, and the star of tonight's show, Katie Reeder. Take care, everybody. Stay safe. Talk to your kids. And we hope to see you again soon. Good night, everybody.